Hi, hello again. Welcome back to my eye changing colors. Apparently, can you see that? Can you notice that? Anyway, um, today we'll be talking about. Well, welcome back to PeerCast. Today we'll be talking about positive psychology and philosophical fulfillment. Don't worry, I don't know what philosophical fulfillment means either, but we'll find out. I'm joined today by Krishna, Youssef, and Ramsey. So let's get them in here. All right, introduce yourselves.
All right, ladies first.
Oh, okay, this is me. Hi, my name is Krishna Cohen, and I'm like an emotional support dog, but as a human.
Okay. You don't have a job apparently.
No, I don't. I'm a peer.
Unemployed.
All
For the
right.
10 million.
Yeah, I'm a peer ed of CAPS.
Okay, so my name is Youssef knows me. I'm also a peer ed, and I'm a delegate at FIU Model UNAM. And Ramsey, go ahead.
All right. As you guys can probably see, my name is Ramsey Aziz. I am a peer educator, been doing it since my freshman year. And I'm also the logic tutor on campus, and I do a lot of other things on campus.
Hit him up.
I try to be everywhere. Hit me up. Yeah.
Hit you up. You're trying to get people to slide in your DMs here?
Always.
On work?
Free
on
real
company,
estate.
on company time?
Wow.
On company time?
Cut that from the audio.
Ramsey's the local goods.
I'm going to have to put that in your work, in your review. That term review. Anyway, so today we'll be talking about positive psychology and philosophical fulfillment. Let's start with things that are proven first. So can someone yo Krishna, hit me up. What is positive psychology?
So positive psychology is the scientific study of what makes life most worth living. So positive psychology is a scientific approach to studying human thoughts, feelings, and behavior with a focus on strengths instead of weaknesses. So it's building the good life instead of repairing the bad, and taking the lives of average people up to great instead of focusing solely on moving those who are struggling to normal.
Right. So yeah. So practically, pretty much, it's the science application related to like psychological strengths and positive emotions, right? You could say that it's concerned with optimal human functioning, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then it's like there's two questions that come up to that, right? So that is, like what does it mean? What is it that makes individuals emotionally happy, healthy, and effective? And then the other side of that coin is what are the skills, right? So attributes and talents and behaviors that lead to positive emotions, mental health, and like effective functioning, right? And this is something that's actually positive psychology is actually relatively new. So I think if I'm not mistaken, it was 1991 when positive psychology was completely established.
That's when it took off. The first time it was mentioned in 1954.
Because due to Stiegelman, his name was Martin Stiegelman, right? What's his name? I forgot his name. This is terrible. Martin Stiegelman. What?
Martin Seligman. He was the president of the American Psychological Association.
Seligman, not Stiegelman. I don't know what I'm talking about, apparently. But yeah, no, but it borrows stuff from like Carl Rogers and
Abraham
Maslow. Yeah.
The humanistic side.
Yes.
It was born out of that. The main difference is like, with the humanistic side, it was primarily like qualitative research, and then positive psychology made it more quantitative. That's the transition.
Exactly. So then Ramsey and Youssef, since you guys are more of the philosophical side, definitely Ramsey is, what is fulfillment?
Well, that's a very big question. What is the fulfillment? And different philosophers throughout the histories have defined it differently.
Would you argue that fulfillment is happiness?
No. For me, okay. I don't argue that it's happiness. But
what do you define as happiness? I guess first is the question.
Well, happiness itself. Well, okay. Let's start off from the beginning. What type of philosophy that I'm gonna be preaching during this podcast? Right. And I'm gonna be focusing on the ideas of existentialism. Mm-hmm. So existentialism is looking into the human subject in existence rather than, essence. And this is based off the ideas of Jean-Paul Sartre, Soren Kierkegaard, Friedrich Nietzsche, Albert Camus, and a variety of other philosophers, but I'll be sticking to like the more modern stuff.
None of which I know.
But in essence, what I'm looking into when I'm talking about fulfillment is meaning rather than happiness. I see, for example, if one continuously chases happiness, it's only a pathway to failure, according to my philosophy. And this is because happiness within itself is a constantly changing thing. What makes us happy one day can make us sad the next day, and I can provide examples of this. But I don't want to constantly.
So your angle is meaning over happiness, right? So then,
absolutely. Yeah.
But the thing with that though, the one I want to Seigelman, is that how you pronounce his name? I sound so.
Wait, who?
Huh? Who?
Seligman.
Say that one more time.
Seligman.
Seligman. Martin. So what Martin said.
Martin.
So what my boy Martin says, is authentic happiness, right? So away from hedonism.
Which is basically self-serving life.
Words are really hard. Sometimes I just can't pronounce things. It's amazing. But anyway, because he wanted to focus more so on right. But what Martin says is that authentic happiness is more so less jumping for joy, right? It's less of hedonistic like way of view, right? Where like it's about momentary pleasures. He said more so he made the point that it was more so about like akin to satisfaction or content in regards to happiness rather than just like and meaning and rather than just like jumping for joy, right?
Oh, well, absolutely. But he's not there. He's arguing not for just chasing happiness. You said it yourself. He's chasing for authenticity.
Who's
Jean-Paul Sartre?
The name I'm not going to be able to pronounce.
Jean-Paul Sartre.
No one can say it. Everyone says it's Sartre. I say it's Sartre. I'm probably wrong. I don't speak French. But Jean-Paul, you can just say it like that. His first name.
Jean-Paul.
He also argues for authenticity.
He's a good R&B singer back in the day.
And like you said yourself, it all falls down to like meaning first, and then from meaning we derive our happiness, and we derive that happiness from living that authentic life.
I guess the honest misconception here is that the idea to chase happiness would be to chase a particular feeling, which is a temporary feeling, because the feeling of happiness as we describe it, whether it's in a philosophical or psychological term, is a feeling, and it's unsustainable because like what Ramsey said, what can make you happy one day can lose that very same effect or potency on you the other day. So the very reason why people want you to seek out meaning or a fulfilling life that's not full of hedonism is so that you can actually find a sustainable and a consistent satisfaction with your life and your presence here on this world through that. So for instance, that will be servicing your fellow man, servicing your community, trying to teach and nourish others. That, for instance, would make somebody overly content throughout their life. However, if you're trying to chase a feeling of happiness, you'd be chasing things that you would associate with happiness, like a certain condition, a certain circumstance. And when something doesn't reach that ideal condition, you'd be inherently unhappy with it.
For example,
Depends, though.
For example, like let's
because
say,
like hold on, because the thing is, we're at this point we're agreeing, right? We're agreeing because what matters is meaning, right? So if you're chasing the constant high of, I don't know, new clothes, right? It will make you happy in the moment, but then they come out with fresh threads, and you got to get those fresh threads.
Yeah,
right? That's how it works with shoes, right? So like it's this constant like I want that, right?
And that's a hedonistic way of living,
But I think you can be happy and content and fulfilled living in a dumpster.
Yes, you can actually.
It's very possible because I think the view of fulfillment, meaning, is very subjective and it's very person to person. And I don't think there's necessarily a doctrine, right, that like I guess positive psychology would implement other than finding what that is for yourself. I'm more so just focusing on like the positives. But like instead of like, because it came after World War II, right? So
Yeah.
like during World War II, you know, psychology was curing mental illness and making life more fulfilling and identifying like the things that are wrong in your life, right? So what positive psychology did was, all right, let's look at the good and build upon that. Yeah, Krishna, hit me with it.
I think it's easy when looking at positive psychology to like automatically associate it with a lot of those self-help gurus and to think that, or like those motivational speakers who, you know, look at like a garden full of weeds and then chant to themselves like, there's no weeds, there's no weeds, there's no weeds. Like, it's not completely ignoring your weaknesses and what's wrong in life, but more so it seeks to complement other models like, you know, behaviorism and, you know, the humanistic approach. It doesn't seek to replace at all. So it's not just like, oh, you know, my life is dandy, great. Like, no. Just to throw in some science, just sprinkle in some science. So what we understand now is that happiness is 50% is based on your genetics. So we consider that outside of your control. 10% is circumstantial. So that would be like your socioeconomic status, your
environmental
age,
factors,
gender, environmental. And then 40% is your internal state of mind. So you can change your circumstances and you can shift your internal state of mind. So it's about 50% like you can control and you can grow out of that. So just to throw that in there. Genetics plays a role, but it's not all of it.
I think the existentialist would agree with like your ideas. Like Sartre, even Sartre like argues that existentialism is a humanism because like, you know, we're focusing on the human and the human perspective on things, you know, rather than really looking at these outside factors. It's how man confronts the world and takes actions upon it, because man is free. But before I go in a whole loophole there, you know,
man is free. Explain that. What do you mean?
Man is free. So in essence, that we are
mainly because I zoned out, but
okay. Well, like we think of freedom in the sense that we are given freedom by, you know, the social contract, according to some philosophers or political theorists especially, or because of the institutions we're under. But rather the existentialists, especially like Sartre and Camus and whatnot, they argue that, well, specifically Sartre, that we are born free and we place restrictions upon ourselves. Why? Because the anxiety that we have due to freedom. How he defines freedom is that we take responsibility for our actions. And most individuals, according to him, are not really comfortable with that. You know,
I actually think that's a pretty valid concern. Like, definitely that's in the abstract realm of philosophy, but we can find that even in the depths of psychology. So, for instance, when studying mental disorders such as like general anxiety disorder and then depression, there's a very particular cognitive structure that plays a really giant role in what determines what makes you unhappy or happy, and it's called learned helplessness. So we have a tendency to learn this helplessness by kind of forfeiting our control over our lives and the outcomes of our situations because of how situations our entire lives have, I guess, turned out through the course. So if they've constantly turned out or very frequently turned out a negative outcome, over time we start to then like focus on an external locus of control and almost learn this type of helplessness that we're constantly going to be subject to these circumstances.
I can see learned helplessness in depression, but not necessarily anxiety. What do you think, Krishna? I'm having trouble seeing the link there between anxiety and learned helplessness because I don't think that really meshes together too well.
Well, okay, so learned helplessness is a condition in which a person suffers from a sense of powerlessness arising from a traumatic event or persistent failure to succeed. So yes, it primarily is associated with depression, but that can also, you know, if you feel as though like you will always struggle with an immense impending sense of anxiety and it is permanent and it is pervasive, then that's learned helplessness.
Well, like, couldn't you?
Yeah, I could see. Yeah, I could see what you were
learned
going at with that.
helplessness and with in the positive psychology realm, it ties a lot with like pessimism and how they define it as being like permanent and pervasive, and that's where they coin in like learned helplessness.
Also very frequent like negative thoughts. It kind of ties into that entire complex right there that kind of like bars you from seeing the more positive aspects of life.
Yeah, and I guess that can fall under like, nihilism, like once you reach that point where, because nihilism means that is like the individual who thinks life is meaningless and there's no point to anything, no point in taking action upon things. Learned helplessness is, I could see that as like a stepping stone towards that, and that philosophical mindset, maybe because the institutions, the popular media, culture, and whatnot teaches that individual there's no point in acting, there's no point in moving forward, and that's a restriction upon their freedom.
So would you,
which gives them more and more anxiety.
How would you combat that to be fulfilled, right? Because that's the goal of this thing.
Well, for like the existentialist, it's all about like the mindset and how we like perceive things,
The perspective?
Like, yeah, it all comes down to.
Are you telling me it's just another fancy way to say perspective?
Basically, yeah. It all comes down to like one's own perspective upon these things. Are you going to accept the institution and what it dictates, or what society dictates, or what the culture dictates as truth, or are you going to take action to confront that and make up your own mind upon these sorts of things?
So what do you?
And I guess it does seem rather grandiose when Ramsey puts it like that. But the reason why he says that, quote unquote, the institution would impose it, because while living throughout society, there are a lot of implicit and like unsaid things that we just accept as principles in our lives. Like conceptions of our worth, of other people's worth of certain things in our lives, of goals that we should strive towards, that we just accept very quietly walking throughout this world.
So then my question, I guess, what I was going to say right now before you jumped in, so how do you combat that?
Well, it's not a simple thing to combat, because
I have a simple.
Oh, you have a simple answer. Okay, hit me with it.
So to reference that boy Seligman, so there's like 3 components, and they can be in different ratios, but we're gonna make it really simple. So you have like pleasure, engagement, and then meaning. So let's define each one. So pleasure, pleasure is kind of what we were talking about earlier, kind of like the more jumping for joy, like giddy feeling. That's one aspect, but it's not the full. And then we have engagement. And what's really cool about engagement is positive psychology, started coining the term of the flow state. And flow state is when a musician is, playing on the piano and they're so grounded and present, and they're just, in the moment, or with an athlete, or even a baker, when they're engaged in the moment and they're fully absorbed and they're present. Being present is very important. And then the third one, having meaning. Like, do you find your work meaningful? Does it serve a greater purpose beyond yourself? Is it bigger than you? Is it in service of another person? And that goes into altruism. And, altruism has been proven time and time and again. It is long lasting for having a sense of like happiness and like contentment.
But what does the
pleasure, engagement?
Well, with flow though, what she was saying, because what were you gonna ask the individual? What about the individual? Is what you were gonna say, Ramsey?
Oh, okay. So what I was gonna say is, what about the individual who doesn't have meaningful work, who doesn't perceive their work as altruistic, or doesn't derive any pleasure from it, or whatnot,
So
it's
about finding that, right?
You're talking about like a person stuck at like a 9-to-5 job, like what should they do? Like, and they're just
like what are they gonna do? You get me? Because I have an answer based off my philosophy, but I want to hear from the positive psychology aspect.
Okay.
So about what flow is essentially, it's yes, you can find flow in your occupation, which would be ideal, right? But flow could be going to a park and painting, right? So it doesn't necessarily have to specifically be the job that you have. what flow is, it's this feeling of like everything just hits the right note. You know, when you're listening to like a good song and you're just, you know, you're just feeling it and just going through it.
Flow state is like getting lost in the sauce. Like you're just in the process.
That's well, I mean, it's euphoric to me. Like it's like I'm in there. You know what I mean?
It can be euphoric. Like
why I say
like
words
the
are
heights of pleasure, and like, you know, you could just be
this sounds like a lot of
making your
semantics,
cake.
though.
Yeah, you look. You guys are throwing a bunch of words, but they don't mean anything.
Yeah. Okay. Hit me with some words that mean something.
The nihilist
I'll
Tell me with some words.
You're the ancient one.
Look,
Okay.
Oh, you're a philosopher telling me
Your
words don't mean
words mean
anything.
nothing.
words don't
Like
mean
dead ass.
euphoria, flow.
Okay,
What
hit
is
me with something then. Hit
No,
me with
it's
something.
important.
Ramsey,
Okay.
spit those bars. Come on, spit back those
Yeah.
words up.
Look,
Come on.
let me throw in something. So, in the book of Myth of Sisyphus by Albert Camus, he makes the argument that Sisyphus, a Greek legend, basically a king who was like damned by the gods to roll a boulder up a hill, and then that boulder eventually, like, once he comes up the hill, it always goes back down, and then he has to repeat it.
Yo, he probably had like some strong calves. Thinking about it, yo.
No,
Like,
man,
dude, that's tough.
So dude must have had gains, bro.
Yo, this boy must have been ripped.
But in essence,
Morally and physically.
Camus is making like an analogy to our lives. We are constantly pushing a boulder up a hill, and it is going to constantly come back down, and we're going to
Yeah, but you're talking in absolutes. You're saying everyone
is.
is pushing a boulder up a hill. I'm not pushing a boulder up the hill. I'm on
Well,
a regular roller coaster, bro. There's
You're
no
going-
boulder. I'm pushing nothing. I'm just
Okay,
driving. I'm driving down a hill. You know, there's
Whatever
ups and then there's downs and then there's ups and then there's downs. There's no boulder. It doesn't roll back down.
The
'cause I made it
boulder
to
is-
stop.
Boulder is a state of mind.
I could be in the middle of the road and then like lose a tire. I could be on the high point. I could be in the low point, lose a tire. You feel me? So it's not necessarily this uphill battle every day. It's this state of you know, there's
Being
highway.
under the boulder and having it crushing you.
It could happen too. You feel me? But then you still get out of the boat.
Wait.
Like
Eli,
I would
just saying,
disagree.
Wait,
I
wait, finish my
don't- you
idea.
hit me with an absolute. You told me that in that kind of flow, that kind of like thing that you were saying, that's a representation of us, that we're always pushing a boulder up a hill, right?
Absolutely, yes.
I'm not pushing a boulder up a hill.
What are you
Is
doing?
your life not?
I beg
I'm
you
on
to
a
consider.
highway.
Just wait a second.
The idea-
If the boulder
okay,
and
goes
there's
up
mountains.
on a graph,
Describe it as whatever you
then
want.
the graph is going up. But if the boulder's coming down, it's coming down. Like it's the same exact thing that you said, just with a different analogy.
It's absolutely not, because you're telling me I can't have the boulder come down in the middle of me going up.
Sure, the boulder can come down.
You're telling me the boulder's
If you
gonna
stop
go
pushing the
down.
boulder-
You're telling me it's gonna go down when I hit the tip.
That-
Dude,
I
can tell
if
you the
Sisyphus
boulder's gonna
loses
fall.
his grip, that boulder rolls him over, dude.
I
I'm
can
just
tell
saying.
you that boulder can fall in the middle at any point in that journey, in that uphill battle. The boulder
Yeah, it
can
can
fall.
fall
over.
at any point in
Yeah.
that.
But you're telling me we have to. But essentially, what you're saying is that it's not gonna fall until it hit the top.
I
That's
didn't
not
say
true.
that.
Oh.
I didn't say that though.
It's
That's
not
what it
about-
sounded like to
okay.
me.
No, he
It's a
didn't say
hypothetical
that.
situation.
I know,
There
but
is
you
no-
hit me
there
with
is no top.
you hit me with an absolute that everyone comes up and gets to this point where they're really good and then it falls down and it crashes.
No, he
It's not
didn't
that
say
we're.
that.
I didn't
it's not
say
He
that.
did
It's
not
not
say
Oh,
that.
I know that's what I
Look, how
got.
you're seeing it.
Ah,
how-
well, I know that's what you understood, bro.
Look, that's
That's
what
what
you
I got.
understood, but you didn't let me finish.
All right, good to go then.
You have to
Go.
let-
Let's go then. Okay.
Okay, so you have to remember, you
Things
know,
hit
how
you up
you're
at the
seeing it
podcast.
is that the top of the hill
Uh-huh.
is like something good. That's not necessarily true. You know,
Okay.
it's just at the top. It's just the top. That's all it is. And then eventually it just goes back down. And so it's just a repetition. You're not your day. For example, you wake up, you brush your teeth, you go to work, you're 9 to 5, you go home, you have dinner with, I don't know, your spouse or your family. You go to sleep.
Your
You
cat.
wake up. That is what that is what going up the hill represents. Just your day-to-day grind, you know, the repetition of things.
Okay.
And that is representative of your life, you see. So whatever it is, maybe you change it up, sure, one day, but it's still, you're just rolling a boulder up a hill, and at the end of the day, it's gonna come back down. You're gonna wake up and do it all over again. You get me? So in that form, one sees life, can fall into the trap of seeing life as inherently meaningless. You know, because all we're doing is repeating the same thing over and over and over and over and over again.
It's the thing is I think you're going too absolute because it's very situational. Because what if I'm going into the hospital and saving lives every day? You feel me? And then it's not a You know what I'm saying? Like,
sure, okay, sure, but
like, because now what I'm getting now is that routine is bad. Necessarily, routine doesn't have to be bad.
No, that's a very narrow focus of what he was trying to explain.
Am I just not understanding this philosopher?
The conclusion
you're just not, yeah.
is bad. No, that's not the conclusion.
Look, because how you're applying these concepts of good, bad, and whatever, you know, and that's subjective. It's supposed to represent repetition. And what the conclusion that Camus makes.
I hate routine, by the way. But you were saying.
Okay, yeah, but you're still.
I hate it.
So annoying. The man is trying with all his heart to make his point.
I drive different routes to work every day.
Sure, but you're still driving to work.
I know, but I like my job.
Okay, and you're still working your 9-to-5 job.
I am. You're right. I am working my 9-to-5.
And I'm sure you're going home and eating food with your girlfriend every night.
Well.
Or whatever. Or
so
eating.
No.
Or eating food by
so
I don't know what
Keep that in.
But like
production, please, just this giant section.
No, keep this in. Keep this in.
We gotta keep this in.
This is gonna be a two-parter, bro.
But basically, we have to assume that for one reason or another, even though that it is absurd, the lives we are living, because of that repetition, we derive meaning from it, from the little things, being able to eat food with our family, enjoying good food, enjoying nature, taking just those little things in life. That is what prevents us from falling into the trap of nihilism, and then, falling deeper into the trap of anxiety, depression, and any other negative that can come from that. You see, so we derive our meaning from the little things as we live, because when we die, it was all absurd. It was just another repetition. You see, and that's just one perspective, the Camus' perspective on this sort of thing. With the regards to the individual who hates his job, or doesn't like the things he's doing, the idea is they can look upon things a little differently and take action to live, you see, and to change that repetition in whatever way, and to look into things like nature or the food they're eating and appreciate these things and derive meaning from that, so they can continue on living and find fulfillment as they live.
Meaning from the food you eat?
Yeah. Meaning from, like, the fact that you're able to eat.
Okay.
Gratitude.
There we go.
Enjoy the foods that you're eating, or the fact that you can enjoy
you get to eat. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, the fact that you can enjoy how the sun feels on your skin, or how the grass feels.
But I think, like, at the end of the day, like, we're really talking about things that are super subjective, right? Because what it really boils down to is what you like, right? So,
you were just giving examples of things.
If you like eating rice every single day, dude, then you like eating rice every single day.
If that brings you fulfillment,
and then you're fulfilled. And you get me? That's why
Ramsey, that scientifically will not bring you fulfillment. Your taste buds will get far too used to it. You'll start to hate it.
Oh, well, I'm sure you'll start to hate it. But then as a free individual, you can take action to change that. All right, I don't like rice anymore, so I'm going to eat cauliflower rice. Bam. You get me?
Okay, so I wouldn't say that fulfillment is that subjective of, just find whatever makes you happy and then that's it and that's how you do it. Like, no, there is a bit of a formula to it. Like, I would say eating rice would be like if you find that pleasurable, then that would be the add-on to that. But you definitely need other aspects, like having, if you're just alone in your house eating rice for the rest of your life, you're probably not going to be that happy. So just to bring up a case study real quick.
Bring up a case study. But I caution that because it's subjective, bro. Because you can't really really tell me if I like going to the park.
Krishna, why do you have
I'm a really bad example
for a point, so you can just go like.
I'm also a really bad example because I hate routine. So routine with me isn't the best. But if I like doing a different thing every day, what am I even trying to say? What I'm trying to say is that
I've been trying to figure that out.
Okay, so there was an 80-year-long longitudinal Harvard study in which they studied these men throughout the entirety of their lives, monitoring their career and their health and their relationships. And this study actually turned it out to be like one of the biggest studies we have on like happiness and fulfillment. So they found that like the people with, close relationships, or they regarded the relationships as great and fulfilling, they were more likely to live longer. They were far more healthier. They had a much higher life satisfaction. An interesting quote, if I can pull up from the study, is the people who were the most satisfied in the relationships at age 50 were the healthiest at age 80. So, going back to eating rice, if you just chilling, you eating rice, but you're alone for your entire life. Like another quote from that study, remembering from the top of my head, like loneliness kills like alcoholism. So being alone for we're talking about years, like extended periods of time. It doesn't have to be a romantic relationship. It can be family or friends. But if you
companionship in
have
general,
meaningful human connection that is authentic, that is honest, that is transparent, it has a high correlation with the quality of your relationships.
And also the altruistic nature of your work in this world, I presume.
Yeah. With the rice eating example, I wasn't, or I don't know who started it. But I wouldn't look upon it like, oh, if he eats rice and he likes rice, he or she will like forever be happy, or find meaning in that. It's like, it's one of those things that we can appreciate as we're alive, as we're alive and, look upon things, and try to derive meaning in this absurd world we live in. And while the institutions and society fall into chaos and whatnot, as we hear the negative news and conflict that's going on around the world, disease, whatnot, we can find meaning and fulfillment when, we eat that good food. We enjoy our rice. We enjoy the time we have with our family, our friends, being able to communicate with one another.
Rice here is quite a big metaphor.
So as the point that you're making with that is that this could be bad, but then you focus on these things instead? Is that essentially what you're saying?
It's more or less yes, but here's the thing. It's not an act of negligence, for instance, just to focus your mind.
Oh, okay. I'm not saying ignore. I'm not saying.
No, I'm not saying that you were saying that either. I'm just saying typically people would have that perspective when we say to focus on the positive of life. We say that when we focus on the positive life, then we suddenly develop some form of a tunnel vision. However, it's not simply just focusing solely on what's positive in your life, but it's also to make peace what's not positive and what you would find.
And I think that's the important key. I think that's the key there.
To make peace with it,
right? To accept it.
Yeah.
And that's where acceptance comes into play.
Absolutely.
There. You have to be able to take the dice that you've been rolled with.
Exactly. Precisely.
The idea, at least
back to what you were talking about, circumstances. So
Ramsey.
No, because I don't want to cut anyone off, because I know I would just like spew it all out.
No, it's okay, man. This kind of does go back to what you're saying about the circumstance, because for instance, when you brought the analogy or the example of somebody being happy even if they lived in the dumpster, that is actually very correct. Definitely in a consumer society, it's hard to find that. But if you actually, or at least take that approach of focusing on the positive and making your peace with the negative to a large extent and making that a staple of your life, you will actually find larger amounts of happiness, because that's the reason why things like gratitude, things like acceptance yield like higher rates of satisfaction and content in life, because with being grateful for something, you're also very objectively seeing what you have in life, and you're almost making yourself appreciate it, because when you start to, for instance, think of all things that make you grateful, you start to almost swell with gratitude. The reaction definitely differs with people, but that positive perspective starts to grow. And so when that positive perspective starts to grow and you start to make your peace with the negative aspects of your life in a healthy and productive manner, your overall satisfaction will rise. And it kind of does go back to philosophy, for instance, because the whole basis of philosophy, at least as the ancient ones put it, was that it was therapy for the soul. It was how to live well, not necessarily how to be happy, because happiness is a feeling, but how to live well. And so once we take certain aspects, if we take the more abstract things that philosophers preach, and we take the more quantitative and obviously scientifically proven that psychologists start to preach, then we can actually develop somewhat of an abstract formula for what can make us subjectively happy in our personal circumstances. Because we tend to attribute satisfaction and happiness to a set of circumstances because that's the society we live in. It's consumers. Almost all of it's superficial, almost all of it's physical or material based. And so we tend to fixate on that as being the formula, or at least as contributing significantly to happiness. We start to be led astray. So the formula is what we have to focus on at the end of the day.
So
love this guy's answer.
On that note, that's going to be the end of part 1. I feel like this is going to be a little bit longer than the time that I have allocated for this. So we're going to do, this is going to be part 1. We're going to do part 2. So stay tuned for that, folks.
There's a doctor who hates his job.
Probably
Right now with the COVID stuff, definitely. But, okay.
I don't know if he hates it. I don't know if he would hate
cut
it.
That, cut that.
Cut
Okay.
that.
Cut that. I apologize. But